Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at how to create a Loki style portal with a dog walking through it. I was mainly inspired by Filmright's version of this effect. They actually created theirs in After Effects. I wanted to show you how to do this primarily in Nuke. As a compositor, if you're going to be working in a studio, it's more than likely you'll be using Nuke, and it's important to learn how to basically do what you need to do in that software specifically. The reality is that most studios these days are using Nuke. I guess we should just jump straight into it. The way I've actually broken up the tutorial is I've separated my Nuke script into basically 4 segments. The first one being the actual portal effect and how we created it and all the creative mindsets through it. Then how to actually track the portal into the shot. And then after that, we looked at some of the roto and edge work, and then finally the most important part of the shot is how to actually integrate your portal into the plate and make it look like it actually belongs in there. So we're going to include some lighting effects, some reflections, and just overall optical things to really sell the shot and make it look like it belongs in the plate even though it doesn't exist. So before I even start this, I wanted to look at some reference. So I just pulled up an image of the actual show. We've got this orange illuminated kind of cube that's got these bright edges around it, and it's got this frosted glass effect and a little bit of chromatic aberration showing through it. Now, I'm guessing the way they did it in the show is they used a lot of CG and 3D effects, but we're going to be looking at how to do this completely in Nuke as a 2D effect. Looking at the first section of the tutorial is how to start creating the effect. I've got the plate at the top, and what I started with is a basic blur node, and I've animated it turning on at the right time that I wanted the actual portal to turn on. So you can just keyframe the blur size to start from 0 to however much you want. In my case, I did 16% because I didn't want to lose all this brick detail, just so we can have some sort of idea of what's behind. Then after that, I wanted to have some kind of splitting of the RGB channels, so I added a chromatic aberration effect. Nuke by default doesn't actually have a chromatic aberration node, so you might need to find one off Nukepedia for free. There's plenty out there, and they're very easy to use, so I would suggest you go find one that works for you. And then after that, to create the actual prism, I started off with the back edge of the prism, like this. And it's basically just a white constant with the rotor shapes plugged in as these open splines in a very thin shape, and the base color of it is white, and I've added the glow as being an orangey, kind of a pastel orange color. And then I've added a very subtle exponential glow to it, just to give it a nice bloom effect. So that's the back edges of it. And if we look below here, to create the actual frosted glassy effect, it's basically just a blur node, and I've got the mask input plugged into a luminance key, which is also plugged into a sort of rusted steel iron texture. You don't need to use specifically an actual stock photo of iron or anything like this. You can even use a noise node to drive this look. I just preferred this because it's kind of a little bit chaotic. It's got some irregularities to it, and I just like the way it looks. And if you look, you might need to tweak how this looks based on what stock photo you're using, how big it's going to be in the shot, and how visible you want the actual granular detail to be. So you just plug in a keyer node, play with the settings to be a little harsh or subtle, however you want to do it. And that's how you get this nice kind of crusty, broken up frosted glass effect. And in the same way that I've keyframed the blur effect on top, it's keyframed the exact same here as well. So that's the exact same thing with the rotor shape and the constant, except I haven't actually put in a glow node on it. I've simply just pre-melted it and put it over the plate. And I'll explain why I haven't actually put the glow effects on it yet. And just before I did that, I wanted to mask off the blurs and the chromatic aberration, all the weird things going on, just so it's not destroying the plate all over. Because right now, if we're looking at the shot, some of the blur effects are going over this wall, then it's kind of traveling over this at the edge of the wall here, and we want to kind of contain it just where the portal is going to be. So to do that, I've got a key mix, and I'm bringing in back the plate. I'm bringing in the actual effect here over the plate itself using a very tight square rotor shape that matches the exact kind of parameters of the outer edge that I have. So now all the blur effects, all the chromatic aberration, everything we have is contained within my outside edge portal here. That's how we do the base portal effect. As for the tracking, the basic idea is that I wanted to get the translation, rotation, and the scale of the shot. Because it is a moving shot, and there's a bit of rotation, a bit of scaling, the best way to do this is to get a 4-point track of something maybe like the doorway, and then turning that into a corner pin. And essentially the way I've done it is I chose the easiest spot to track as that being this corner here. Put a tracker here, tracked it all the way through. There's probably no obstructions at the top. And then I went in and tracked the other corner. That one was fairly simple. And then the main issue I had was more the bottom part, because we had the dog obscuring this corner and this corner here. I think it goes out of frame actually. So instead of tracking this corner here, I would maybe track this corner here, because you'll get a bit more consistency with it. So just for example, we put a tracker here and let it do its job, and we'll see if it breaks at all. Yeah, it breaks. And I'm guessing that's because it's a lot of luminance changes because of the dog walking past. It's causing a lot of shadows and it's throwing off the track. And that's completely fine, so we can look at how to actually deal with that. There's a setting in the settings tab where you can adjust the track for luminance changes, so the track itself is going to do its best job to ignore the changes in luminance values in the shot so that it can stick to what you've intended for it to actually stay on. So I'm going to actually choose a spot where there's no shadowing going on, and then start there, and then track backwards and forwards. So go back, looks like it's done an okay job there. Let it keep going, and then we're going to go back, and yeah, okay, it's done a decent job of ignoring the shadow of the dog. It's a very small thing, but it definitely helps you out. So that's our third track. Our fourth track is going to be the most problematic, and that's because the dog does obscure the corner that we need to track, but we're going to do our best to interpolate the motion of that corner and hopefully get an okay looking track. The reality of working in this kind of work is that you're never going to encounter the most perfect shot. There's always going to be things covering your track. You're going to have lots of grain. There's going to be dark shots, and just so many challenges you're going to come across. And I wanted to almost replicate the challenges that you do find in the studio. A lot of tutorials you might find out there will shoot the most perfect looking plate with no artifacting, no problems, and I feel like you won't learn the most out of those. So if we shoot it in a realistic way, we can show you how to deal with the little adversities that come around. I think from here onwards we get a decent track because nothing obscures it. And then from here backwards we're going to have to be a little careful and stop it right before the dog comes into plate. Yeah, it looks like the track breaks there because of the dog. The way I've approached this is when I stopped being able to track the corner, I would try to manually move the tracker myself. So I'm obviously focusing on this corner here, and if I look on the top left, that's my stabilized view. And as I said in my previous tutorial, if the stabilized view is moving around, it means your track isn't doing a good job. So if you see this part where I've tracked it well, it's doing very minimal movement or no movement at all. Whereas if I want to manually move it, I can judge it by how little it moves. So I'm going to put the track where I think it needs to go, and then I'm going to let it play and see how much the stabilized view actually shifts. So it looks like we've done an okay job here, and then we're going to go to about here and then put it back to where it belongs. So in your case, if you're doing something like this, you might need to go in and test the shot, apply the tracker to the portal effect, and then see if it's actually slipping or not. So now that we have our 4 points of tracking, the way to actually export this track as a 4-point corner pin is we select the frame that we want to start the track at. That's going to be our reference frame. Yeah, so you want to go to the frame that you started making the portal effect on, set the reference frame to that exact frame, and then turn on all these buttons here. So these are all the rotation, scale, and transform values. So it's going to help you calculate that. And then in the export tab, you can export it in different ways. I just like the most basic one is where I bake all the detail into a single corner pin node, so it doesn't have an annoying link to it. So we click that, click create. Yeah, you need to select all these, then create. Now you have your corner pin here, and then when you apply it underneath your portal effect, it should track nicely. So what I've actually done is to test the tracker is instead of using the entire portal effect, I've simply got the front edges, and because it's a really perfect straight line, it'll let me determine how good the actual track is. So I can focus on these corners here and zoom right in, and then play the shot forwards and back and see if there's any slippage, do I need to fix it, and it'll just help me kind of QC everything about it. So I can look at each corner and then check, okay, do I need to maybe fix the track a bit? If I can't do it in the track, can I manually do it in the actual rotor that we've created? There's a lot of things you'll need to consider when you're actually doing the shot yourself. So that covers the tracking portion of it. What you can do is take the tracker or the corner pin and just slam it right underneath all the elements we've created for the portal effect. So that'll be on number 1, we got our back edges. We can put the corner pin right here, and then underneath we've got the frosted glass texture, put it there, and then all the other ones as well. Now, the third thing I want to look at is how to do the rotor and the edge work. I don't want to focus too hard on this because we did look at this in a previous tutorial, and I can just run through it real quick. So we have our main portal effect here. That's looking good there. And then what I wanted to do is roto this screen right edge of the wall, and then also to make the dog look like it's half appearing through the intersection of the portal, we need to do something a little different to usual. So I'll just run through that real quick. So to do that, I actually I decided where the position of the plane of the glass is going to be, basically by eye, because there's no real 3D way of checking. So I just kind of eyed it where maybe, okay, I'm looking at the dog and it looks like he enters the doorway at around this part here. So starting on this frame, I went in and created this roto setup where I'm not rotoing the entire dog, I'm just rotoing I'm rotoing against where I think the glass is going to be, and it does take a bit of sort of artistic kind of guessing as to how it's going to look. I didn't want to create just a straight line downwards because the dog's shape is round, so I'm going to kind of conform to the edge of the dog's posture. And so how I've done it is I've kept the edge roto almost stationary, and then I've basically rotoed the rest of the dog how I would roto it anyway. So we got our little roto like this, and then also in some portions I've created this separate gap so it looks like there's some depth to the glass, and it looks like the dog is actually putting its paws through it, and some parts of the dog are coming through before the other parts of the dog, if that makes sense at all. So that should just look like this now. And one small issue that you're going to come into when doing something like this is the back part, the actual plate is going to show through the edges of the roto that you're doing. Now that we've got the actual the whole portal effect going, and we've got the roto working too, you can see some of the brick is showing through the motion blur edges of the dog. And this was the exact same scenario that happened with the Starbucks coffee cup removal, whereby the book motion blur edges were showing some of the background, and we need to do something to fill these in. A very, very simple way of dealing with this is you get the key mix node, and then in the A pipe you can put in a paint node and actually just paint the edges outwards. The only problem with that is that you might start you need to be really careful so the edges don't get broken. So you can get the ears and then smudge them outwards like this, and it'll give you a kind of decent result like this. Or another way you can do it is a more procedural way. It's something I prefer because it doesn't take as much time, and we can go ahead and use an edge extend. And that's effectively just sort of a smear, it smears the edges of where your roto is so that anything that's in the motion blur won't really show. And that's effectively what's happening in this scenario here. So all this color is being smudged outwards so that none of this brick detail is showing. And then I also went in and did a little bit of hand painting in the more finicky areas. Cool. So that covers how to do the roto and the edge treatment. The most important part I wanted to focus on is the actual integration of the shot itself. So what I'm talking about here is we have our effect, our main base effect, but what's happening around it because of the effect itself. So for example, if you want to put in any sort of CG physical object, it's going to have some physical properties that it needs to react to as if it were in real life. So if I have a big metal ball in the shot, I need to consider the fact that it's going to reflect certain colors, it's going to cast shadows, it's going to do a lot of things that make our eyes think that it's going to sit in the actual shot. So the first thing I want to do is, because this door here is slightly reflective, I wanted to see if I could potentially reflect some of this portal effect on the door so that it looks like it's a little bit brighter, and it kind of makes it look a bit more realistic or anything. So I've got and done that at the top here. I basically just used a simple grade node, like a square, and I've angled it in kind of a fairly accurate way as to how I think it's going to reflect, but depending on the angle of the door, and I've just animated it turning on in the same timing as the actual portal. And then not only that, but when the portal is turning on, it's got these thin beams that form from the side, and I wanted to reflect that into the shot as well. The way I did that is I actually took the front edge of the portal effect here, and I've got the animation happening on it, and I just flipped it across and put it over the door. I've also defocused it and blurred it to make it give it a bit of diffusion, so it looks like it's reflected vaguely in the door rather than being a perfect reflection. Because the paint does have a bit of roughness to it, I don't want it to be exact. So as you can see here, as the portal is turning on in lines and rows, the actual door is also reflecting some of these rows as we go in. It's very subtle, but it helps sell the shot, and whoever's watching the shot is going to subconsciously not see, okay, because this is happening and I know this happens in real life, they won't question that the shot looks too CG or too fake, even though what we're creating is something that doesn't exist in real life. The other thing I want to do is, because it's a fairly bright thing, it's going to cast a bit of light on the ground, and that's also the exact same effect of putting a grade node with a mask on it, and the kind of angle of the mask is kind of angling out of the doorway, so as if it's casting light through a hole. And then a really, really cool effect, probably my favorite effect, is adding an optical glow to things. And I don't know what it is about glow effects, it just really helps sell the shot. It looks very pretty, it just marries everything together, and there's a certain setup I like to use for this. What that is exactly is, because the dog walks in front of the portal, he's going to be blocking some of the light coming from the edges. And if you think about how a camera lens is looking at light, if something walks in front of light, that thing is going to occlude whatever the light source is, so that any glow that happens into the lens, it's going to be obscured by whatever's blocking it. So to explain that simply, I've got the front edge of the portal, and I used a stencil that basically cuts out the dog Roto from the portal itself, and then on top of that I put my exponential glow effect. So now you can see there's some little gaps here that occlude the glow. That's actually the dog going over the portal, and that just helps give a nice light wrap over the dog, and gives it a bit of, just ties everything together really well, I think. So if we look at that here, we can see this nice soft glow effect happening over the whole shot. And to give it this kind of rotating trickly effect that goes down the edges, what I've done is also I've got under the same stencil and under the edge of the portal, I've got a stencil node that's driven by a noise node that's animated going downwards like this. So now if we look at the actual edge of the portal, we see these lines going down, and underneath that I've put a exponential glow, and then plus that on top of the shot itself. So now we have this sort of organic pulsating effect that I think looks really good. It doesn't really happen in the show itself, but I just wanted to add some of my own kind of artistic flair to it, just to make I wanted to give the portal a more organic feel. Also, as the dog walks through the portal, I wanted to make the dog feel a little more integrated with the portal and make it really look like it is going through something. So I've used the roto of the dog and just put a grade node over the actual plate. So here's my dog roto, and then here's a grade node. I basically just lifted and multiplied up to give this nice halo-y effect, and then also to make it look like it's not completely just giving an overall halo effect, because we are using the complete roto of the dog. I used a stencil node and only cut out areas that aren't actually over the portal. So if the dog's nose is poking through, I'm going to have this mask that's cutting off the front edge, because I only want the effect to be over where the glass is going to be. So it's almost like a fake way to show that there's some depth into the effect. And then lastly, I added a bit of a distortion using the same roto around the dog. I wanted it to look like it's kind of rippling through as he goes in, just to add a bit of nice integration to the shot. So as his paw comes through, I like that the portal ripples out and there's sort of a circular distortion going around the dog. And then just as a final touch, I added some chromatic aberration on the edge of the dog as he comes through, just to give it a more sci-fi look. Just because we're looking at a prism, there's going to be a lot of distortion, going to be a lot of RGB separation and things going on like that. And then just as a final touch, there is a very, very subtle flare happening, because I'm assuming the portal is releasing a lot of light energy, a lot of energy that's going to be blooming into the lens and causing some artifacts. So just a little subtle flare. You don't need to add that. I personally like it. And then a final look grade that goes over the shot, and you basically have a Loki style portal effect with a dog walking through it. I did explain this pretty quickly, and admittedly it took a while to get this to look exactly right. I'll be honest, creating the actual portal wasn't very hard, and for you it's not going to be very hard either. You can, to be honest, go to any YouTube tutorial and look at how to make a cool looking portal, which is going to give you a nice looking image. But what I like to focus on are the finer details, the things that VFX supervisors are going to look at and pick on for you to take the shot from a 90% to 100%, such as edges, contact shadows, little integration details that you can add in, things that you don't usually find in the shorter form tutorials online. But the purpose of these tutorials is to show you how we approach shots in an actual studio environment and basically replicate that for you guys so that you can have the same practices. And when you do apply for jobs, you can demonstrate that you have the ability to QC your own work, to focus on the little details, and just take your shot from that 90% to 99%. So I hope you took something out of this tutorial. I really would like you to go out, shoot something on your own, create this effect by yourself, just do something, and I hope this really benefited you guys, and I'm very excited to see what you guys do. Thanks.